Hello, and welcome to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm your host, David Nolan. Today, I'm talking to Larry Zimpleman, a former Academy President who, in his professional life, rose from actuarial intern to become Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of the Fortune 500 company Principal Financial Group. He currently sits on the board of Swiss Re. Larry, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You have a long and illustrious career as an actuary. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you became an actuary and about your career path as well.
Sure. Well, I really come from a relatively middle-class background in eastern Iowa and rural Iowa. I was the first in my family to go to college, although there was never really a question as to whether I would go to college. I actually had a person of influence that was a guidance counselor when I was in junior high school, if you can believe that or not. And he had recommended to me that I think about becoming an actuary. Of course, I had no idea what that meant, and I'm not even sure why I remembered it. But when I became a senior in high school, I pursued different college textbooks, and I found out that, lo and behold, at Drake University, which was, of course, not too far from my home in Des Moines, actually you can major in actuarial science. So that really became the one and only college that I applied to, and fortunately was accepted. When I was a junior at Drake, I had an opportunity to receive a scholarship and part-time work from a company that was then labeled Bankers Life Company, which of course today is Principal Financial Group. So that started me on a 45-year career, all the way from part-time actuarial intern to becoming president and CEO in May of 2008, and then ultimately retiring as chairman, CEO, and president in 2016. So again, a great 45-year run that I truly enjoyed every bit of that.
It's pretty remarkable that a conversation in junior high led you to the heights that you reached. That is amazing. And it's interesting because several of our other guests pursued very wavy paths towards becoming an actuary. We've had classics majors and the rest. So that's impressive. And if you don't mind me saying, I believe you're also a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think Hall of Fame just means you're old. I think more than anything else. I don't know that it may or may not speak to accomplishments, but yeah, I've been very fortunate. Most of that is because I was surrounded by, a group of very high performing, very capable employees, because as all of us know, you don't do these things by yourself, right? There's just no way you do it by yourself. You do it with others. They support you and you try to support them. And I was very fortunate to work with some really high performing people over my career.
That's great. Yes, and you're absolutely right. It is definitely a team effort. So obviously you found the profession very fulfilling. Would you like to tell us what were the most fulfilling aspects of it?
Yeah, and certainly my work with the Academy is really the part that I really did find fulfilling. Certainly, in terms of being a principal and taking on new responsibilities and all that, that was fulfilling. But I had the opportunity and frankly the encouragement from my boss at the time, a gentleman named Chuck Rome, who was the chief actuary, to get involved in Academy activities. And this is about when I was 35. And I think, Chuck saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, which was an ability to do public policy work, to communicate. And the thing that I always enjoyed was that you had the opportunity to influence public policymakers through your own communication and help them solve, really big problems, whether it's Social Security solvency or Medicare solvency or, Taft-Hartley retirement plans, new piece of pension legislation. The list kind of goes on and on. So I really started Academy in 1981 and worked mostly on the retirement side. I was on the pension committee, chaired the pension committee, joined the board, became the VP of pension practice, and then ultimately became the president of the Academy in 1995, 1996. For me, it was quite a heady thing. And we need to talk about mentors, because I really had the opportunity to be influenced by some, amazing actuaries working for the Academy as well that took me under their wing.
That's great to hear. And I would like to hear a bit more about that, and perhaps also about how you may have mentored others.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a series of mentors. There's not, necessarily a single person. Certainly I had mentors, in my work at Principal, but I had several important mentors in my work at the Academy. And, there's people like, which are names that for those of us that have been around a while, I think they're names we all know. Their names McCarthy, who at that time was at Milliman. People like Jack Turnquist, again, another Academy president who did some tremendous work in the professionalism area. And certainly one of the largest mentors for me, or most significant mentors, was Norm Crowder. Norm, again, a longtime consultant, Academy president, had huge influence on me and provided a lot of encouragement to me to continue to be involved in Academy work. So those are three. There could be many others as well, but those three really stand out.
Well, interestingly enough, Larry, I am sitting in the Turnquist room recording this podcast, and the one across the hallway is the McCarthy room. That's our main conference room. So those two people were certainly very, very big hitters. And as a way of giving back, how do you see, or how would you describe being a mentor to somebody else for people who are thinking about taking on that role?
I think of mentors just from the standpoint of encouragement. My role is to encourage people to pursue whatever it is that happens to be, their passion. And of course today, and it's a wonderful thing for the profession. I mean, the actuaries today are in a whole variety of different fields. It's been wonderful to see, and I think that's going to continue with new things like artificial intelligence and all of that. So I think it is encouragement, it's support, it's reinforcement. That's something I enjoy. I'm still involved with the business college out here at Drake, Des Moines, and I try to put in some time there, speaking to young students, not just actuarial students, but young students, encouraging them to further their career and so forth. And it's just been very fulfilling for me personally, and I feel like I'm at a time in life when I need to give back.
You mentioned that you were the Academy president, and if my records are correct, I think you were certainly one of, if not the youngest Academy presidents in our history. Could you say a few words about the Academy and why you see that as being perhaps different to other actuarial organizations?
Happy to. I mean, for me, the Academy was always the public policy outreach. I'm aware that maybe there's been, a little bit of that isn't quite as clean and clear among the various actuarial organizations as it used to be. But at least the Academy that I know and the Academy I knew was without question the public policy outreach for the profession. And that was what made it so exciting and interesting and fulfilling for me, was that you had the chance to help solve real world problems. Certainly the work I did at Principal was very fulfilling, but by its nature, it tended to be a little bit more technical and to some extent, a little more inward looking. But when I got to go do Academy work, I was looking out. I was looking out to society. I was looking out to public policy makers to try to help inform them. I guess it's kind of sport of season, to bash to some extent public policy people, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't seem to matter. But I have to say that almost without exception, truly without exception, of all of the public policy people I met, of all of the elected officials that I met doing Academy work, to a person, they were very serious in wanting to understand the landscape more completely, whatever that happened to be. And they were more than happy to allow us, the Academy, to come in and speak to them and share our knowledge and share our expertise. And that was just, a terrific, terrific thing to do and something I enjoyed very much.
I can assure you that work continues. We do Hill visits every year in the pension area as well as others. And I think the welcome that Academy members get is very similar today. There are a lot of policymakers who are very, very keen to get the independent actuarial viewpoint when they're trying to figure out problems.
Right. And, by definition, we were trying to be nonpartisan. We weren't trying to grind any particular axe at all. We were just trying to make things better. So when I look at things like, pension, of course, there was a whole series of almost a retirement law per year in the 1980s. It slowed down a little bit in the 1990s, but then, the Pension Protection Act in 2006 actually even today is still one of the landmark pieces of legislation. I and a number of other people from the Academy worked on that for probably 5 to 10 years before the PPA got passed in 2006. It takes a while, but, in my view, that PPA was one of the most significant pieces of legislation really since ERISA. And so, again, to be, a very small part of that and to work with others in accomplishing that was, again, something that's personally very, very fulfilling.
That's great to hear. Yes. And ERISA, as you mentioned, it'll be 50 next year, I believe. And the Academy will be holding some events to mark that as well. I'd like to go to a bigger picture, if I may. Now, you mentioned AI, and that is certainly a big discussion point at the moment. And I'm wondering what you might think about the assertion that actuaries are uniquely qualified to have insights on AI and big data and to assist business people in making decisions around those spheres.
Well, I think actuaries are qualified definitely to be part of the conversation. I always think, however, that especially when you're dealing with new technologies like AI, I think we all, no matter what background we come from, I think we all need to be a little bit humble about, what it is that we're getting into and how it's going to benefit or perhaps not, depending on the situation. So I do think actuaries are very qualified to live in the AI world. After all, data sets are what actuaries are all about, almost no matter what area of the business that you practice in, property casualty or life or health or whatever. So data sets are what we live by. And I view AI as just another tool to help us in managing large data sets and divining from large data sets the most meaningful conclusions that can come out of that. So I think AI can be a great value in the work that actuaries do, but there always has to be that application of human judgment and real world judgment that always needs to be there, rather than just automatically assume that whatever the AI engine is generating is the ultimate answer. I think that human intervention and review is something that will always be there, well beyond AI.
And beyond that warning, for want of a better word, about being careful of the data and making sure you're able to see what it's saying, do you have any other words of warning for actuaries who are considering jumping into this sphere? Or indeed, let's say any other development?
Yeah, as I said, I think always having a humility about what you know, but a humility about what you don't know, I think is incredibly important. The idea that actuaries would somehow uniquely command that space, I think, is actually not a good thing. I think the more we can partner with related professions, then I think, and history shows, I think that the better off it's going to be for everybody. It's by interacting with others that we learn. It's not talking to ourselves. We can learn something, I think, by talking to ourselves, but we're going to learn a lot more when we talk to people who come from a somewhat different point of view. So, again, I think AI can be a tremendous value for actuaries, and I think it'll help us elevate our practice. But I think we need to be thoughtful. We need to be careful. I know from a professionalism standpoint, from a qualification perspective, I'm sure there's a lot of work going on today to sort of figure out what is the necessary background in order to consider yourself sort of fluent in AI from an actuarial perspective.
Let me take a moment to remind you that you're listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Our annual meeting, Envision Tomorrow, takes place this coming November 13th and 14th in Washington, D.C. Find out more on our website, actuary.org. And with your significant experience, do you see other great opportunities, or are there other opportunities for the actuarial profession in the coming time?
Well, I think the opportunity remains robust. One of the hats I wear today, the board of directors of Swiss Re, which is one of the larger global reinsurance companies, and we see the real world impact of all sorts of natural disasters, and as they call them, convective storms and things like that. And so there remains, I think, David, this what I call protection gap in all aspects where actuaries work. It could be life insurance, it could be health insurance, it could be property casualty. It doesn't really matter. If you look at it in sort of very simplistic terms, the protection gap is about 50%, meaning about 50% of the risk, whether it's a premature death in life insurance, or whether it's a disability in health insurance, or whether it's a natural disaster in property casualty. But in rough terms, across all those areas of the business, the risk coverage is only about half of what the true risk is. The other half goes uncovered, and so both as a nation, as a global population, we collectively need to do more to try to close that protection gap. At that level, ever since I've been in the profession. We haven't made a lot of headway in closing that protection gap. And I think it's a significant challenge that all of us need to think about and do whatever we can to encourage closing that protection gap so that people do have resources to fall back on. And when bad things happen to them, they aren't left sort of, deal with it on their own without any sort of protection or any sort of risk transfer to other funding sources. So that would be my primary one. Is it's still fundamental that our core businesses still have to grow, but we have a lot of growth opportunity, and we have to encourage the public and do what we can to better market how we provide more resilience to society.
That's a cautionary tale, if I may say so.
Yeah, and we're living it out, right? I mean, when you see earthquakes and you see, natural disasters, hurricanes, typhoons, I mean, and these are occurring in places where you think that the protection gap would be relatively small in some cases. So for example, Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been hit in the last 2 weeks, both with a typhoon and then with an extremely heavy convective storm. And, there's significant physical loss of buildings and facilities and other things. And even in a place like Hong Kong, I think there's, it's only about 50% covered. It's not, in many cases, I think it's less about lack of wealth or lack of income to cover it. It's just lack of impetus to actually take the action to buy that protection.
And obviously that's not to say anything about the recent storm in Sudan and the earthquake in Morocco, where coverage would likely be far less.
Absolutely. And of course, earlier this year, Turkey and Syria was another one. I mean, I'm only making the point that I understand in some developing countries like Morocco and Sudan and that coverage is less than we want it to be. I get that part. But my point is that even in developed areas like Hong Kong and Florida and California and places like that, people are just going unprotected and they're just rolling the dice. I think we as a profession need to help educate society as to how they can better manage those risks. And that's what actuaries do.
Larry, I want to return to something you said near the beginning about how you had a direct line from junior high through Drake University and the actuarial science course there. And obviously there are several actuarial science courses around the country, but it's still a niche profession. Not everybody is given the direction that you were. So if you were to have a word for future actuaries or math, people interested in math and looking to what career they might follow, what would you say to them about the actuarial profession that might encourage them to join?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, I think almost everyone likes to be a problem solver. And, for sure, that's involved in every aspect of the work that actuaries do. The work is really all about solving problems, helping people deal with, some of the most difficult challenges of their life, whether it would be a premature death, disability, or saving for a financially secure retirement, or designing a national flood insurance system, or, the list kind of goes on and on and on. So I really look at the work as actuaries do as being very noble work, truly being very noble work. And so, my encouragement is always that I think people will find it very fulfilling. I'm very open about the fact that it's a process involved in becoming an actuary, and it's not an easy process and it's not a quick process. But I think it is a fulfilling process, and I think following the exam sequence, then I think going on very worthwhile career opportunities, I think is something that's really encouraging. But the main thing for me is actuaries just do very noble work, and I was always very proud of that. I always said that I know there's other noble professions, medicine and law and everything else, and I appreciate all of that. But certainly the profession of actuarial science is, as I think about it, is actually one of the most noble ones that's out there, right there next to God's work.
You've been listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm your host, David Nolan. You can find out more about the Academy on our website, actuary.org, where you'll also find information about our forthcoming annual meeting, Envision Tomorrow, which takes place this coming November 13th and 14th in Washington, D.C. Thank you for listening.